Miharu then onnani National Conference of Bar Examiners ke President Judith Gunderson ge video recorded presentation.
Thank you all for inviting me to speak at the Maldives' first annual bar conference, Raise the Bar. I am honored and humbled to have been asked to speak to you all. And from afar, I welcome you all, lawyers in the public and private sectors, representatives of multilateral institutions and BCM partners, the judiciary, and law students. I would like to especially thank Dr. Miriam Jabin, the Secretary General of the Bar Council of the Maldives, and Ismail Wisham, the President of the Bar Council of the Maldives, for this opportunity. My name is Judy Gunderson, and I'm the President of the National Conference of Bar Examiners. NCBE, as we're known, is a nonprofit organization that was formed over 90 years ago to serve admissions authorities in the United States. And by admissions authorities, I mean the 50+ state Supreme Courts and the admissions boards that they work through to admit new lawyers to the profession. In the US, admission to the bar is done on a state-by-state basis, not on a national basis. But all jurisdictions use a licensure exam for all or most of their would-be lawyers. In that context, I think it important to share NCBE's mission and vision. We exist to promote fairness, integrity, and best practices in admission to the legal profession for the benefit and protection of the public. We work to try to ensure that the profession is competent, ethical, and diverse. I'd like to start my remarks by congratulating the BCM and all involved with the development and administration of the Maldives inaugural bar exam. I understand that the first bar exam in your country will be administered in November. As those of you know who envisioned and implemented the first ever licensure exam for lawyers in the Maldives, it was a monumental task, what you have accomplished, full stop. And to do it in the very short time frame that you've done it, and with the pandemic as the backdrop, is nothing less than extraordinary. So you deserve a round of applause. I know what it takes to develop the content, to decide what the content should be, to decide how to administer the content, and then to score it. Each one of these steps is a project by itself. You're doing remarkable things here that will have a broad and lasting impact on the profession in your country. And maybe after all that work, you might ask yourself, was it worth it? Well, I hope your answer with that will be a resounding yes. Because by developing a bar exam, you are in fact institutionalizing a professional, competent bar that the public and clients can have confidence in. You are supporting and promoting the rule of law, which is the foundation of a justice system that is fair, impartial, and sustainable. You're giving those who enter the profession, the law students who are attending your conference, a vote of confidence and a commitment to welcome them as colleagues. And you're doing that through a fair, anonymous, and standardized process. Admission to your bar will not depend on who applicants know or who they are, but rather on what they know. I probably don't have to tell any student attending this conference that the bar exam is a high-stakes exam. It's the same in the US and everywhere. A graduating student's ability to earn a livelihood and practice law depends on passing the bar exam. So because of that, because it's a high-stakes exam, the exam has to fulfill certain fundamental criteria. It must be valid, reliable, and fair. And who says so? The standards for educational and psychological testing, which NCBE follows, as does any high-stakes development expert. The standards provide criteria for the development and evaluation of tests and testing practices, and they provide guidelines for assessing the validity of interpretations of test scores for the intended test uses. The standards are not a set of legal requirements, but instead criteria and guidelines for establishing sound testing practices that apply to different types of testing, including licensure tests. And as many of you know, the process that the Bar Council engaged in using outside consultants, measurement professionals, and test design experts was thorough. And I hope that to all would-be examinees and all members of this audience, knowing that the Bar Council developed the exam with these foundation principles in mind, validity, reliability, and fairness, gives you confidence in the exam and the exam results. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what validity, reliability, and fairness mean. Validity is that the exam adequately measures the constructs that it is designed to measure. Regarding the bar exam, a construct refers to the knowledge, skills, and abilities required for competent entry-level practice. And how do we know what those KSAs are for entry-level practice? Well, for licensure exams, this question is typically based on findings from practice analysis. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but NCBE has done various practice analyses during our 90-year existence. Most recently, we completed one 3 years ago. The test also has to be reliable. That is, it should have reproducible results. When test scores are reliable, the scores of a group of examinees will be consistent or stable over multiple occasions of testing, unless a real change in the examinee's KSAs has occurred. So there are a lot of factors that can affect the degree of consistency in test scores. But for a high-stakes exam, like the bar exam in the US or in the Maldives, it should be irrelevant to examinees when they take the exam. Are they taking it in November of 2022 or are they taking it in November of 2023? It shouldn't matter to them which test form they see or when they take the test. Another overarching issue in testing is fairness to examinees. The purpose of fairness is to maximize, to the extent possible, the opportunity for test takers to demonstrate their standing on the constructs that the test is intended to measure. Concerns for fairness and equity for examinees are threaded throughout the entire testing process, from development through administration through scoring. And finally, but importantly, the reason for any licensure exam, whether it be in the medical professions or in architecture or accounting or engineering, is that it is a stamp of competence or a consistent stamp of approval for the public. The overarching purpose of any licensure exam is for public protection, and the public deserves and expects a valid, reliable, and fair test. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the steps that NCBE goes through for test development, and these are steps that we take to ensure that the exam is clear, consistent, and fair to examinees, that it samples appropriate content, and that it is the right degree of difficulty. The process that the Maldives Bar Council went through to develop your bar exam is likely different from this, but I can assure you that the underlying concepts of using subject matter experts, having multiple layers of editorial review, bias review, and content review were followed to ensure that the exam is fair, reliable, and valid for would-be lawyers. I think this excerpt from a graphic that we created several years ago underscores the notion that there are multiple steps in the development of items and then the creation of a test form. The test development process and timeline at NCBE varies to a degree based on the kinds of tests that we develop. And we develop 4 tests, 2 are multiple choice tests and 2 are constructed response tests. sort of like an essay test. One is an essay test and one is a performance test. I understand that the tests that the Maldives are giving are multiple choice exams only. And so that may affect the timeline for development. But having said that, multiple choice items are very challenging. Good multiple choice items are very challenging to develop, as any of you who've worked on those know. So as this graphic represents, questions are written just by someone knowing what the test content specifications were first. And that process by itself in the Maldives, I know took a long time. And I can tell you that those processes at the National Conference of Bar Examiners take us a long time as well. Right now, we're working on the next gen of the bar exam. So we're in a big process where we're reviewing what the bar exam should be. And just developing what the content specifications should be for the next gen exam has taken us the better part of a year. So when a drafter sits down and starts to write a question, they first have to start with those content outlines. And so you develop those. Someone sits down and they write these questions, and it really starts out as a very solitary process. Part of what I think you can see in this graphic that I've shared with you is that after a while, the test development process becomes very collaborative, and there are many sets of eyes and different perspectives reviewing items. Everybody comes at a question with a little bit of a different perspective, a little bit of knowledge already about what they know about the topic. And when you have that collaborative work on honing and fine-tuning an item, you really get the best item possible. And when you get the best item possible, you get the best test forms possible. So I think the graphic underscores the multi-step purpose that test development takes, whereas it starts with content, then it goes to drafting, then it's collaboration, and then it's vetting. The Maldives worked with outside content experts, worked with measurement experts, and internal experts and editorial review. And all of those pieces, all of those different players add something different to ensure that the questions are clear to examinees and that they're accurate in the law. That's very important. You don't want to have any mistakes in your questions where there might be some ambiguity in the law that you haven't allowed for in the question, or that it's just wrong. And so all these steps help to prevent that. At NCBE, we pre-test all of our items before they appear on an exam. With an inaugural exam, that may be a very challenging process to engage in, but eventually that would be something that most testing organizations work on, which is pre-testing an item before it actually counts on an exam. One part of this graphic, which I lopped off the second slide on, deals with all the test production aspect of it, which is once you have the questions and once you've decided what content should be sampled, is there enough domestic relations? Is there enough procedure? Is there enough criminal law? Is there enough in the torts area? Once you have the exam assembled, you have to produce the exam. And production might sound easy, but it's actually not, right? Because you have to print the exam under, if you're using a paper-based test, which it's my understanding that you are, you need to find a secure printer. You need to make sure that all of those test materials that are now printed are accurate, that there aren't any mistakes with those, and that they stay completely secure until the time that the exam is administered. So I'm going to talk a little bit next about exam security. It might go without saying, but it is absolutely critical to the integrity of the bar admissions process and to the exam itself that the bar exam questions remain strictly confidential. No one can have early access to the exam questions or the exam form other than the people who worked on them. I mean, obviously they wrote the questions, so they're going to have some knowledge about what's on the exam. At NCBE, we use a wide range of external item writers. They're volunteers, subject matter experts, and they all sign confidentiality agreements that they won't disclose what's on the exam. And that happens, or that those confidentiality requirements live on after an exam is administered, because it's very common for a high stakes exam to repeat some questions from one exam to the next. You know, it's also sounds easy, but it's not, to ensure that any communication regarding the exam is done via secure conditions. So email itself, communicating about an exam, or to email questions to someone as an attachment, is not secure. And so at NCBE, we use secure communications mechanisms, and we don't talk about the items via email. So there's the actual writing where the items are stored, there's the transmission of the items, there's the talking about the items. Is very important to think about the systems in place to maintain confidentiality. And like I said, it might go without saying, but I'd like to step back a moment and say, or ask you to ask yourselves, well, why is it so important? Does it matter if someone gets prior knowledge of the questions? Well, it certainly does, because we talked before about how important it is that the exam is fair, valid, and reliable. And if some people who are going to take the exam have had prior access to the exam questions, then they have an advantage, because they can study ahead of time and they can know exactly what is covered, versus other people who go into the exam just having studied all the content and not having that specific language. So the results of any licensure exam are grossly undermined if any candidates have any kind of prior exposure to the questions. So that's why at NCBE, we're so careful about exam security, and we work hard to ensure that everyone involved in test development, whether it's our staff, our outside content writers, our external reviewers, or even pre-testers, depending on what our pre-test mechanism is, make sure that they understand that exam confidentiality is very important. And as I noted, many high stakes exams, standardized exams, like the bar exam is, some of those questions are reused. So confidentiality remains well after the exam is administered and scored. You know, one other sort of related issue to talk about, or to just think about, which we do here, is disaster planning. What do you do in the event an exam item is breached or an entire exam form is breached? So that's something, particularly as a testing program becomes a little bit more mature and the item bank grows a little bit more, you need to think about what sort of a backup test you have, that and what you do if an exam is breached, and what you do depending on when that exam is breached. So that's all the kinds of planning that I know that the people at the Bar Council have thought about. If I'm imparting anything to those of you who are interested in bar exam development, I hope it is that it has to be done with care and thought, and planning for all kinds of contingencies. Again, I can't tell you enough how impressed I was, and that I am, with the work that the Bar Council of the Maldives has done on this inaugural exam. Everyone can be very proud of that. Shifting gears just a little bit, we're, as I mentioned before, NCBE is working very hard on revamping the bar exam, which will debut, the new bar exam will debut in July of 2026. And at NCBE in the US, the bar exams are given twice a year, at the end of February and the end of July. And so this new exam will debut at the end of July. And we're conducting right now a lot of outreach to jurisdictions to talk to them about the new bar exam. Our research phase and our practice analysis phase and our test design phase are all done. We are now in the implementation phase. So for our staff here, probably like the staff at the Bar Council, it was a lot of heavy lifting for us, and it remains a lot of heavy lifting for us. If you'd like more information about some of the work that we're engaging in on the revamped bar exam, I would encourage you to take a look at our website. There's a QR code on the slide. And if you scan that, you'll come up to our next gen bar exam website. And there's a wealth of information there, which I think you'll find interesting since you just yourselves have been through a similar process. So again, with that, I'm going to conclude my remarks. I'm going to thank you once again for this invitation. I wish I could be there in person, but I also want to congratulate you for a job well done. And I wish you all the best of luck for a smooth bar exam administration next month. Thank you very much.